When people brought a case to the king for judgment, Absalom would ask where in Israel they were from, and they would tell him their tribe. Then Absalom would say, "You've really got a strong case here. It's too bad the king doesn't have anyone to hear it. I wish I were the judge. Then everyone could bring their cases to me for judgment, and I would give them justice." But yeah, he's basically trying to appeal to the people and say, hey, I really would like to help you with this more than you're currently being helped, but I'm not king right now, so I don't have that authority. Kind of planting the seed in their minds of maybe making him king. What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Okay, so we are looking at 2 Samuel chapter 15. Past couple of chapters, David's one son, Amnon, did something with his half-sister that he really shouldn't have. So then Tamar, the sister's name, her full brother Absalom was mad at Amnon, eventually had him killed, and then fled Israel, or at least Judah. But anyway, he fled for fear of, revenge, I guess. But a few years later, it was clear David kind of missed Absalom. So Joab, his commander, basically convinced David to let him go get Absalom and bring him back. And that's kind of where we leave things here. David is king over Israel at this time. He actually had done some things earlier that he shouldn't have. Engaged in a bit of infidelity, you might say. And adultery, as the Bible would define it. And then God... sorry. And then God said that part of the punishment for that would be that he would have family troubles, like I described. But anyway, okay. So, that brings us to our current chapter, 2 Samuel 15. So here we go. After this, Absalom bought a chariot and horses, and he hired 50 bodyguards to run ahead of him. He got up early every morning and went out to the gate of the city. When people brought a case to the king for judgment, Absalom would ask where in Israel they were from, and they would tell him their tribe. Then Absalom would say, "You've really got a strong case here. It's too bad the king doesn't have anyone to hear it. I wish I were the judge. Then everyone could bring their cases to me for judgment, and I would give them justice." Okay, so Absalom is currently trying to just, subvert his father and his kingship, and basically convince the people that he would be a better ruler, or at least a better judge, who would hear them out better than his father David. That's where, you really want to try and start if you're looking to, develop any sort of uprising of the people, is just try to get on their good side first and foremost. And make them dissatisfied with the way that things are. It's a really common political tactic nowadays, actually. But that's very tangential to this. Let's not get off on that right now. But yeah, he's basically trying to appeal to the people and say, hey, I really would like to help you with this more than you're currently being helped, but I'm not king right now, so I don't have that authority. Kind of planting the seed in their minds of maybe making him king. Alright. And then we get to verse 5. When people tried to bow before him, Absalom wouldn't let them. Instead, he took them by the hand and kissed them. Absalom did this with everyone who came to the king for judgment, and so he stole the hearts of all the people of Israel. Yeah, that was the whole motivation for what he was doing. He's trying to basically get on the people's good side and get their hearts kind of away from David as king. Verse 7. After 4 years, Absalom said to the king, "Let me go to Hebron to offer a sacrifice to the Lord and fulfill a vow I made to him. For while your servant was at Geshur in Aram, I promised to sacrifice to the Lord in Hebron if he would bring me back to Jerusalem." "All right," the king told him, "go and fulfill your vow." So Absalom went to Hebron. But while he was there, he sent secret messengers to all the tribes of Israel to stir up a rebellion against the king. "As soon as you hear the ram's horn," his message read, "you are to say, 'Absalom has been crowned king in Hebron.'" He took 200 men from Jerusalem with him as guests, but they knew nothing of his intentions. While Absalom was offering the sacrifices, he sent for Ahithophel, one of David's counselors who lived in Gilo? Man. Soon many others also joined Absalom, and the conspiracy gained momentum. Whether or not Absalom actually made this vow is up for debate, but that's the excuse that Absalom's giving to King David to let him go to Hebron. And he says he's going to make sacrifices, which I think he at least actually does that. But he's also setting the scene to more officially stir up a rebellion and get people rallying around him against David, who is his father, just so we're clear. Yeah. Note there, after 4 years, that's as in the Greek and Syriac versions, Hebrew reads 40 years. Well, that's quite a difference, but why would the Hebrew read 40 years? Because we read before that David was king for 40 years in total, so that wouldn't really make much sense that he'd be rebelling against his father 40 years later. Because, like, David wouldn't have even still been king then, according to what it said earlier. So, that strikes me as odd. Now, maybe, again, the original text that they pull this from, I don't know offhand the, like, which one is how old and whatnot. And I certainly am not one to be able to verify accuracy on any of that kind of stuff and how close it would be to what the original should be, but that strikes me as odd and seemingly contradictory that it would say 40 years. Because, yeah, David wouldn't even be king then, according to what it said earlier. I don't know. So, let's just assume it was 4 years rather than 40. Because that would also be a long time to spend just trying to get the people on your side and plan a rebellion. Note there where it says in Hebron, it says in some Greek manuscripts, Hebrew lacks in Hebron. So just say, I promised to sacrifice to the Lord if he would bring me back to Jerusalem. But he was already talking about Hebron, so the in Hebron part is kind of implied there anyway, I think. Maybe. No other notes there. So he gets 200 men from Jerusalem to take as guests. Because I guess he was telling them this was some sort of momentous occasion, or like, you know, the fulfillment of some sort of promise or something that he made to God. But while he's there, he sends out messages to tell people, hey, we're about to group up and rebel against David. And even gets... It says Ahithophel was one of David's counselors. For some reason, I thought Ahithophel was a priest. Not totally sure on that, though. Either way, somebody who was part of David's, maybe not innermost circle, but at least some sort of inner circle. So, this isn't just a haphazard rebellion that Absalom's putting up here. But anyway, let's move along to verse 13. A messenger soon arrived in Jerusalem to tell David, all Israel has joined Absalom in a conspiracy against you. Then we must flee at once, or it will be too late, David urged his men. Hurry, if we get out of the city before Absalom arrives, both we and the city of Jerusalem will be spared from disaster. We are with you, his advisors replied. Do what you think is best. Alright, so I guess that reasonably enough, David kind of assumes that if he and Absalom, you know, clash there in Jerusalem, that there's going to be a whole lot of trouble, a whole lot of damage done, possibly even a whole lot of innocent people caught in the crossfire. And he doesn't want that. So he's like, all right, let's go somewhere else. So that, you know, whenever Absalom inevitably comes here seeking me and my kingdom, that there won't be all this collateral damage. Then we get to verse 16. So the king and all his household set out at once. He left no one behind except 10 of his concubines to look after the palace. I almost read that as after the place. Anyway. The king and all his people set out on foot, pausing at the last house to let all the king's men move past to lead the way. There were 600 men from Gath who had come with David, along with the king's bodyguard. Okay, when it says pausing at the last house, I'm guessing that means like the last house in Jerusalem? So like right as they were at the border of the city, they kind of make sure that everyone that they need to get out of there gets out. Something like that is the impression I get. The wording's a little unclear on that exactly. There were 600 men from Gath, which they had conquered through David's prior conquests. So even though that's known as like a Philistine town, because that's where Goliath was from, that is, you know, they had people from there who would be part of David's kingdom at this point, along with the king's bodyguard. Hebrews says the Kerethites and Pelethites. I guess that's just the places and or like tribal groups that the king's guards were from. That makes the most sense of that to me. Alright. Verse 19. Then the king turned and said to Ittai, a leader of the men from Gath, "Why are you coming with us? Go on back to King Absalom, for you are a guest in Israel, a foreigner in exile. You arrived only recently, and should I force you today to wander with us? I don't even know where we will go. Go on back and take your kinsmen with you, and may the Lord show you his unfailing love and faithfulness." But Ittai said to the king, "I vow by the Lord and by your own life that I will go wherever my lord the king goes, no matter what happens, whether it means life or death." David replied, "All right, come with us." So Ittai and all his men and their families went along. So, I mean, I don't know if this was somewhat a result of David's reputation amongst the Philistines, because he lived in a certain part of Philistia for a time, and gained a pretty decent reputation there. But whatever the reasoning is, these men from Gath are trying to stay loyal to the king and not just be like, well, whatever, it's not our people, we don't really care. Note there, unfailing love and faithfulness. It says in the Greek version, Hebrew reads, "And may unfailing love and faithfulness go with you," rather than "may the Lord show you his unfailing love and faithfulness." Same general meaning, though. It's just, it lacks, I guess, in the Hebrew, it lacks mention of the Lord, because these men are from Gath. They're Philistines, probably. So, what would they care about the Lord's love and faithfulness? They don't even worship the Lord. But, either way, still, David is trying to give them an out and wish them well. But Ittai's like, nope, we're sticking with you, because you're the king, and we are loyal to you. So, the men of Gath go with David and his men. Now we'll get to verse 23. Everyone cried loudly as the king and his followers passed by. They crossed the Kidron Valley and then went out toward the wilderness. Zadok and all the Levites also came along, carrying the Ark of the Covenant of God. They set down the Ark of God, and Abiathar offered sacrifices until everyone had passed out of the city. Maybe they did that at that last house that was described earlier. Doesn't say that's where they did it, but somewhere along the way, you'd assume. And unsurprisingly, all the common folk realized that this was not a good situation, and they were sad that, something like this was happening. Most of them probably would have known that Absalom was David's son, although did they know that it was him rebelling? Not 100% sure. But anything that would have driven King David to leave would have been a sad day for them, because David was, for the most part, a good king. Maybe not always the best father, but a good king. Note there, it just says Abiathar went up rather than offered sacrifices until everyone had passed out of the city. That makes it a little unclear what would have happened there. Although, a lot of times previously when it mentioned offering sacrifices, it said something like that person or that priest went up to offer sacrifices. So maybe that was just a, I don't know, shorthand for that. I assume the meaning is similar, though. Alright, on to verse 25. Then the king instructed Zadok to take the ark of God back into the city. If the Lord sees fit, David said, he will bring me back to see the ark and the tabernacle again. But if he is through with me, then let him do what seems best to him. The king also told Zadok the priest, look, here is my plan. You and Abiathar should return quietly to the city with your son Ahimaaz and Abiathar's son Jonathan. I will stop at the shallows of the Jordan River and wait there for a report from you. So Zadok and Abiathar took the Ark of God back to the city and stayed there. So, David is... I guess this is his way of being like, okay, well, if it's God's plan that I come back, great. If not, then at least the Ark of God will still be in the capital city. It'll still be in Israel, you know, at the place where it's supposed to be. And there won't be any random curses or anything like that coming upon anybody because it's not where it's supposed to be. Maybe that's not exactly what he's thinking, but something like that, I would imagine. That's what it seems like. Because he's understandably uncertain about his fate in the immediate future. So, still trying to look out for God's people as a whole, more than just for himself, though, in doing this, or at least suggesting this. And I guess he also wants, you know, some of his men on the inside, you could say, to report to him, let him know what's going on. So, time to look at the notes here. Hebrew says, and his dwelling place instead of and the tabernacle. Bring me back to see the ark and his dwelling place is how that would read. Which, you know, in a way, the Ark of the Covenant was supposed to represent God's presence to the Israelites then. So, the tabernacle is just where it generally was. In a sense, same meaning. In Greek version, Hebrew reads, Are you a seer, or do you see? Here's my plan. I mean, he still clearly intends to tell them his plan. The question there from, or questions potentially from the Hebrew, give it more of a sense of like, okay, hasn't God already told you something like this? Really unsure if that's what it would be getting at, but I guess it's him in that case trying to like appeal to their priesthood and whether or not they would have heard from God on a matter like this. Anyway, you and Abiathar, Hebrew Lax and Abiathar, it would just be you should return quietly. But then it later says Zadok and Abiathar took the ark. So I mean, Abiathar's implied in there anyway. And it mentions Abiathar's son, Jonathan, anyway. So, like, whether or not it says that outright, it's at least implied that Abiathar would be part of that. Where it mentions the Jordan River, Hebrews says, at the crossing points of the wilderness, rather than at the shallows of the Jordan River. I would think that's where they considered the crossing point anyway, because that's where they crossed over to get into, the bulk of what was the Promised Land / Israel then anyway. So, all that to say, same thing-ish. Alright. Moving on to verse 30. David walked up the road to the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was covered, and his feet were bare as a sign of mourning. And the people who were with him covered their heads and wept as they climbed the hill. When someone told David that his advisor Ahithophel was now backing Absalom, David prayed, "O Lord, let Ahithophel give Absalom foolish advice." When David reached the summit of the Mount of Olives, where people worshipped God, Hushai the Archite was waiting there for him. Hushai had torn his clothing and put dirt on his head as a sign of mourning. But David told him, "If you go with me, you will only be a burden. Return to Jerusalem and tell Absalom, I will now be your advisor, O king, just as I was your father's advisor in the past. Then you can frustrate and counter Ahithophel's advice. Zadok and Abiathar the priests will be there. Tell them about the plans being made in the king's palace, and they will send their sons Ahimaaz and Jonathan to tell me what is going on." So David's friend Hushai returned to Jerusalem, getting there just as Absalom arrived. Okay. Further plans on David's part to get inside information on what Absalom is doing, and also potentially to, like, throw off Absalom and give him bad or at least conflicting advice. That's clearly, like, that's kind of what he's going for. He's trying to, I guess, plead with God, appeal to God, and say, all right, well, if you really don't want Absalom to be king, then, like, mess him up a little bit. Like, give him some bad advice, lead him to do something that will have him no longer be king, so that I can return, if it is your will. If you want Absalom to be king, then it's you, God. You'll do your will in this either way. But he's wanting to, stay informed and be able to, make contingency plans as things go. So he's sending yet another advisor back to Jerusalem to be, there with Absalom and further contribute to the information transfer. I don't know if that's the best word, but anyway. Okay, so that's where we leave things off for chapter 15. So Absalom has whipped up a rebellion. David leaves Jerusalem at least, and is planting people to inform him of what'll be happening. But yeah, that's going to do it for this chapter. Okay, so Absalom has whipped up a rebellion against his father David. David, in order to minimize the damage, has left Jerusalem, leaving it real easy for Absalom to just swoop on in. But he's also kind of setting up some contingency plans and ways to be informed of what's going on. Maybe that's something he learned from when he had to flee from Saul and realized that, hey, this might be a good thing to have. But that's just me speculating. Anyway, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel to see more of my videos as they are released, or at least have easier access to them. Make sure you look down in the description for info on social media pages and links to find and follow those to get more ways to keep up with what I'm doing. And, of course, leave comments down below all that with any thoughts you have. So that'll do it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. But whatever the case is, until next time, stay cool, people.